Hey there, everybody. I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and I'm excited to share with you the 83rd episode of the weekly Ratchet. This is a variety show all about board games. I'm going to be talking about big board games and little board games and like some red board games, probably a yellow board game. There's going to be some hard board games and some easy board games. There's going to be games. Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the weekly Ratchet. And as always, hope you've had a fantastic week of getting to play some games with family and or friends. Listen, there's a lot to cover in this episode. There's a lot to talk about. I don't have any new games, which is good. As I mentioned, I've been kind of trying to not buy games lately. This room is it's overcrowded, and I need to reorganize. And at some point, I know we're moving out of here, right? So even then, I'm kind of like, do I really bother reorganizing? We looked at a house today, and all of a sudden, we're thinking we might actually want to move forward with it. And I can't even think about what it's going to be like for the next 2 months through the holidays, trying to buy a house. And I'm starting a new job. And I talked about that in the last episode. And that's really kind of the main thing I want to talk about today in this episode is that I realize that there is a non-zero chance that this is the last weekly Ratchet episode that there's going to be. I don't think that's the case. And I don't want that to be the case. For one thing, I would love to get to 100. That's really kind of not really a goal that I've had, but something in the back of my mind. Gosh, hitting 100 would be really cool. And of course, even then, I don't want to stop then. Like, that'd be weird, but whatever. The point is that I'm going to be back in a job location every day. It's like 30 miles from here, so it's going to be a good 45-minute commute every day. And I'm not going to be able to sneak over in the morning and do a little filming and then like through a bunch of meetings, sit there and do some edits when I'm kind of listening to someone ramble on about stuff that I don't care about. I'm not going to be able to do that anymore. And I don't know how I'm going to fit life and playing games. I certainly don't want to quit playing. I love playing games. I love this hobby. But this hobby, the filming one, the editing one, the YouTubing one, the social media one, I don't know how that's going to fit into things. So I got to find some ways to kind of streamline the process. I don't really want to change the content. This isn't a very involved show as it is. Did I get any new games? Hey, let's talk about a question of the week. And here's the stuff I played last week. I'm probably going to have played a little less games every week just because work. So maybe that'll just naturally reduce that segment. Maybe that'll reduce the workload, reduce the length of these episodes, and maybe make things a little easier for me to work with. But I'm still going to have to probably record on Saturdays and edit Sundays, or record Sundays and edit that afternoon. Of course, if we're out of town or something's going on, well, then it's just not going to happen. I don't know if it's still going to be the weekly Ratchet. That wouldn't really make sense if I had to keep skipping them. And so I just don't know what to do. And I don't know what would make the most sense. Of course, obviously, again, if I just kind of find myself, I go a couple of weeks and I just don't have time this week, or I didn't play anything this week, well, then it's just going to die on its own. Unfortunately, but we're just going to have to kind of find out together. So listen, this is your chance. For the 200-something people or so, sometimes 300, I've literally got the list of episodes here in front of me, the couple of hundred people every week who watch this, if there's something about this show that you like the most, let me know. If you really, really like this show and you watch it every week, but you don't subscribe or you don't comment, maybe throw something out there. Kind of like I need a sign off, right? I need like a check in. I need something to kind of let me know, like, hey, we're here and we don't want this thing to go. And maybe that'll give me a little bit of that ambition, because I have talked to a lot of people who have said, yeah, the moment I started going back to work every day, my ambition to do anything in life just plummeted. I got home every day and I didn't want to do anything. And I'm like, God, I don't want that to be me. But I know that's going to be me. And I'm ADHD. I don't need any help with procrastinating or putting stuff off or getting distracted. So I don't know. Like I said, this is a chance to sort of like shout out and say, hey, we love this part of it, or it'd be great if maybe just this survived. And I realize you don't need this bullshit right now. Like, I get it. This isn't what you need. And I'm not going to linger on this much longer, but I just don't know what the future holds. I do want to thank all of you who continue to watch this, the 200-something people, 300-something people that tune in, even if it's for a few minutes. I'm glad you're here, and I've had fun chatting with you and entertaining you and interacting with you for the past almost 2 years. And I hope that somehow that will continue to thrive. I will say that I tried to actually reach out to Tom Vassell and see if I can kind of go back to do some stuff in the Dice Tower. And actually sounds like that's not going to happen. And it actually sounds like I might kind of be done with the Dice Tower. He didn't say that, but I was like, hey, can I do some content? He's like, yeah, let's talk on the phone. And that kind of tells me he doesn't need contributors anymore. And I know he doesn't. He's got a whole staff of people. They release tons of videos. And even when I put videos out there, it takes weeks sometimes for them to hit the channel. And that's not worth it to me. I can put them up here in a day. So that's not something I can continue to explore. I don't really know that I want to. I've worked really hard to make this channel what it is. But as I think I've talked about, the numbers are kind of sloughing off. I'm not getting any new viewership. Viewership's way down, actually. Subscriptions are way down. And maybe that is just the industry or sort of the hobby telling me, you've had a good run. So we will see. Anyways, that's sort of the opening of the show. I do have some games to chat about. I do have a couple of answers to question of the week. So why don't we go ahead and have a show? All right, last week I asked you to tell me about a board game that you love at one player count and hate at another. Now, the numbers overall for last episode were a little down, which is probably why the comments are a little down, but that's okay. We have a couple here to chat about. Up first was Teshra, who mentioned Space Station Phoenix as a game that works great at 2 players, but with 3 or more, it becomes unwieldy, as since your opponent's actions are also available to you, it becomes too much to keep track of. Now, I found that kind of interesting. I have played Space Station Phoenix at 2 and at 4. I don't think I've played it at 3 that I can recall. And I'll respectfully say that I disagree with this, at least in the sense in which you spoke of. So you were talking about, and you're right, each player has like spaceships in front of them that are represented by just cards. And you can activate any of your spaceships or you can activate any of your opponents, although they're typically more expensive to do that. So you want to try and activate your own if you can. However, and I'm a little wishy-washy on the numbers, but I believe each player only has 2 ship cards that are, that are unique to themselves. The rest are all the same. And so, you can generally kind of look and say, okay, well, you're, the base build ship that you have, which is the same as my build ship. Yours is available. I've already used mine. Maybe I'm going to go ahead and sneak over and use yours too because I want to do an extra build, whatever. Keeping track of each player's unique ships is certainly helpful. But at most, you've got 6 to think about versus just the 2 of your own. Maybe an 8 total, I should say, 6 additional. So I didn't really see an issue with that because I think that as you sort of lean into that more, for one thing, it gets kind of funnier, like, I'm going to use your ship again. It's like, you better not use my ship. And that was Katie Bowerly of the Meeple Society that I was impersonating there. But anyways, what I found to be a challenge with that game was managing those tracks. The sort of reputation tracks that you have with the 4 or so different guilds or factions, whatever the heck they're called. I found that to be really, really, really challenging because if any player gets too far ahead on any of those tracks, then you all just get squashed. And if it's a track that players are leaning into, that player is going to just take off with whatever that track gives them. And so you've got to constantly kind of try and keep yourself bumped up those tracks. In a 2-player game, it's not quite as bad. Like, okay, I can kind of you're not focusing on them, so I can go and work on this. But in a 3 or 4-player game, someone is always focusing on going up those tracks. And so, like I said, if you get left behind, it's going to be it's just going to be a hard game for you in general. And you're not going to get a lot of good stuff and you're going to have problems. So it's an interesting comment on Space Station Phoenix. On the other hand, Red Panda Games described Root as his #1 game of all time, but said that it is a 4 to 5 player game because it is simply unplayable at 2. Now, he closed by saying it's just not as good with the hirelings when you play it at 2. So I'm kind of assuming that when you say unplayable, you simply mean that it's not as much fun, because I would disagree that Root is unplayable at 2. It's just not as interactive. It's not possibly as interesting. It's certainly not as tactical. And I would certainly agree that it is not as much fun if that's the kind of game that you're into. I'm really on the other side of the coin with that. I think my most favorite play of that was at 2. We were using, I think, at least one AI bot. but I wasn't worrying about it. The other player was kind of managing it, and he probably wasn't managing it correctly. But whatever, doesn't matter. I can see that, right? Again, that is a game where it is highly, highly interactive. It's very confrontational. It's a big fighty game. We're going to talk about that actually here in a little bit. But, I kind of like it too because I can just sort of focus on what that player is doing and try and find the best way to just clobber them, right? But anyways, I can see that, yeah, if you like that deep tactical and just getting pulled in every different direction and chaos, right? It's just a bit of like, holy crap, there's so much going on. Root is absolutely not going to be as good for you at 2 or 3 players as it would be at 4 or more. Agent83, however, says that he has no games that fit this description, that even 2-player games can be ruined by analysis paralysis, while experienced players can make a game go quicker at higher player counts. He also suggested that some games can get tighter and more competitive at smaller player counts, such as worker placement games with limited worker locations. Now, it's that last bit of that I think is kind of what I was focusing on. I think that you're right. Any player can ruin any game at any player count. It doesn't matter if you're playing with 2, you're playing with 5. If you've got one person who's a problem, they're going to drag the experience down for anybody. And it doesn't matter what that problem is. It can be analysis paralysis. It can be just a shitty attitude. It can be anything. So I think that isn't really kind of like my focal point. You're right, though, in that, there are certain mechanisms that work better at certain player counts or can be scaled better, which is kind of like you're talking about here, at different player counts. And that's kind of what I was looking to focus in. So I agree with that latter part for sure. And speaking of worker placement, Jeremy Brooks was quite specific with Rock Hard 1977, which is fairly forgiving in terms of available options at 3 players, but has far too much downtime when 5 players are at the table. And that is definitely kind of what I was thinking of is, yeah, certain games that just don't work well at certain players. And I think worker placement's a good example. And I think it's really kind of interesting, too, because a lot of these worker placement games, and I was thinking about this as I was writing these comments down, like I think about Dinogenics, which you block off spots at certain player counts. I think a lot of Viticulture, which has 3 worker locations for each action, and one of them is used at 2 players, the other one's used at 3 and 4, and the other one's used at 5 or 6. But what's kind of interesting there is if you're playing at 3... then the designers, however they got to that, well, I'm assuming that was Jamie Stegmaier in some capacity, right? I think did he design that game? I actually don't know the answer to that. But they decided, whoever it may be, that they're going to unlock that extra worker at 3 or 4 players, which means at 3 players, you actually have presumably a little extra space. But at 4 players, you haven't unlocked any new spaces, so things are going to get a little tighter. At 5, things open up again, and at 6, they would presumably get tight again. Although then, exactly as you said, Jeremy, there is the issue of just plain out downtime. And that actually takes me to the game of Obsession by Dan Halligan of Kayenta Games. And I've talked about this many times. I think here on this channel, I definitely did over in the Dice Tower a long, long time ago. And that first time I played that game, I hated it. But that's because the guy who taught it was using an old rule. And that was that if you're the first player, then you have the second player, the third player, and the fourth player. And then the turn order shifts to the player to your left. So if I took a turn, I then wait for a turn, I wait for a turn, I wait for a turn, I get skipped, I wait for another turn, I wait for another turn, I wait for another turn, and then I finally get to go 7 turns later. And the problem with Obsession is that it's not a game where you go, oh, it's my turn. All right, cool. I'm going to move here and I take these things and I'm done. Or, I trigger this spot and you get this and, maybe we chuck some dice and I'm done. No, it's, okay, well, I'm going to go here and activate this. And then I'm going to play these cards. These cards give me these things, but then now I got to move these workers over here. I'm going to be drawing some cards. I get some money. Oh, now I got to buy something on the market. Like, holy crap, they're a long term. And what usually happens is someone goes, all right, I'm going to go ahead and activate this. I'm going to play these 3. Oh, wait, I can't play this card. Oh, geez. All right, hang on. I planned everything around this. All right, hang on. I got to rethink everything that I've been sitting here staring at, hopefully planning my turn for the past 7 or 8 minutes. And then you're just like, oh, my God. And so that was a game that I played Obsession, I think, twice now, or once at 4 and once at 3. And I basically decided that I will never play it at more than 3 players again. I think it goes to 5. I don't think he ever added a 6th player, which would just be absurdity. So it is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think with every Euro game, downtime becomes an issue. And not even just Euro game, any game can really just drag on. And again, it's not an analysis paralysis thing. It's just, look, there's just a lot of stuff you do on a turn sometimes. And I think of games, I'm going to talk about the Eve game again here for a moment. We had turns, it was, okay, my turn. All right, I'm going to choose a section, and I put a flag down. That's it. And then you have other turns where it's like, all right, guys, I got some shit to do. We're going to be here for a while. Buckle up. So yeah, that is multiple issues that you can have with these various player counts. And I think it's an interesting conversation, and I appreciate the comments. Let's go ahead and chat about some recently played games. Okay, just 4 games to chat about in this episode, and one of them I have chatted about fairly recently, but I did take a much deeper look into this, and so I do want to chat about it again. This is the Eve War for New Eden 4X space-based strategy game. And I'm not going to really dig too much into sort of like the rules or how the game plays. I did do that in just the past episode. But it is essentially a 4X space game where you're choosing actions on your turn. You're going to get 3 actions that you get to pick in each round sort of for free. And then you may optionally spend $5 to take a 4th turn, $10 to take a 5th turn. And then you have to pass. Once everyone passes, you have what was originally a very lengthy sort of upkeep phase that sort of speeds up as you get familiar with the game. And then you just keep playing until someone gets to 10 points. Except for that, we played with the Titan expansion, and we played with that both times that I've played this game. But I actually had a couple of viewers who helped me out last week and mentioned that when you play with the Titan expansion, you are now playing to 12 points and you have to finish the Titan. And I actually have one of these here because I love this freaking thing. This is the Galzyr faction Titan, and these are sort of a magnetic bit of pieces. You have to first build the sort of core body, and then each of these pieces has a name. Each ship uses the same pieces. I can't remember what they're called. There's a doomsday device. There's like some sort of a warp core upgrade. And I think there's a command module, something like that. But as you finally sort of snap all these pieces on, then your Titan becomes finished. And you might be able to... Way to go there, genius. When you finish this thing, you might be able to see here from the base, it's got this kind of unique shape to the base of it. Well, that's because it actually sits on the hexagonal tiles of the map. So where this thing sits, you would have 2 hexagonal tiles on each side, one in front of and behind. And so this ship is so massive that it's considered to be adjacent to all 4 of those tiles, and therefore can affect those tiles. It doesn't actually do anything in combat. It helps you roll a die. So technically it lends 1 die to the fight. Which is just kind of funny. I mean, I have never seen these things in the actual game of EVE Online. I certainly never got to fly one. I do know that they take months, if not longer, in-game to build. And, it takes a long time to build them in the board game. Anyways, so when we played it last time, we didn't know that. We were only playing the 10 points. We had no idea that these had to be done, had to be completely finished. So like in that last game, I did focus myself in trying to get this thing built. And the one thing that made me do was focus on gathering different resources and doing some extra building in the systems that I've already explored. When we played this the first time, we just expanded as quickly as we could across the map. In this play, even though I played with my wife, now she had kind of done a demo game with me, just kind of helped me get my head around the rules. And I played again with Daniel. We only did a 3-player game of this. I had a 4th player. He wasn't able to show up. But I think we all kind of understood, especially because we knew we had to get this thing done and we could understand what it takes to build the thing. All the different, you need every resource in the game ultimately to build this thing. And that's a lot of work. And so I think that just naturally because of that, we spent more time focusing on the things that we already had instead of immediately trying to spread ourselves out and gain all these extra systems. I was the first to get this thing finished, and I got it out and deployed. And it is interesting because it kind of acts as an aircraft carrier in the U.S. Navy. And if you're familiar with the U.S. Navy, you'll know that a lot of times we use those aircraft carriers as just risk deterrents. Like, it's a floating city. It can launch an arsenal of aircraft in a moment's notice, and it can basically handle just about anything in a moment's notice, especially when it's supported by its carrier group of destroyers and cruisers and whatever else is around. And so again, like just by sticking this guy out here, it kind of says like, hey, you want to mess with me? I dare you. And it was really interesting because actually Daniel was looking to start a little bit of a fight. And then I parked this guy out on one of our borders, and he's like, I'm going to go maybe pick on your wife a little bit. And so here's the thing. In the last game, we were kind of lamenting because it felt like these mission cards that you get are too swingy. And I still say that's the case. I was also lamenting about how quickly we scored and how quickly we got to that 10 points. So what we did with this play is we kind of left out some of the domination scoring. So in the base game, it says if you control 5 systems, you score a point. If you control 5 systems and you have the most systems, you score a point. If you control the center system, you score a point. But the thing is that you just have to have that center system. It's not like Twilight Imperium 4th edition where you have to, or any of the editions. I don't know. 3rd may do the same thing. 2nd, I have no idea. But where you have to actually have an action card, you have to control that system, play that action card to score that point. Here, you just have it. You don't have to have anything on there. You just have to control it. Which just kind of seemed boring. And like I said in the last episode, uninventive, lazy as far as design goes to say, oh, just have a thing there and you're fine. So we left out a lot of that domination scoring. However, we didn't really necessarily need to. I didn't even get to 5 systems until very late in the game. I had 4 that were really doing well for me, and I just kind of stayed there. Daniel had explored a couple of systems that just weren't very economically valuable, and so he did not bother gaining control of them. My wife actually did kind of spread herself pretty thin and controlled a bunch of systems, and she would have had a couple of points. But when the game ended, I had 12, and both Daniel and my wife had 2 or 3. And so even now I'm struggling to know, well, is the game hard? Is the game broken? By leaving out that domination, did we cost them a bunch of points? I think my wife may have had 2 or 3 more points by the time she controlled all those systems and would have started scoring. I think she also would have had the majority, so she would have been scoring a little more often. I may have had to fly this little bad boy a couple of systems over and start stealing systems from her. Don't know. I think that because we changed the focal point to strengthen those systems, build things, get your economy going, be able to manufacture. For me, I was manufacturing those mission cards. This idea that you're gaining these missions, and if you can complete a mission, you get 1 or more points. And so I was constantly manufacturing these things, and that was really great. And the other players really weren't. They and even a couple of times Daniel sat there and was like, well, I just don't know how to get points. I was like, well, go get mission cards. He's like, well, yeah, but I just don't really like just doing missions. I was like, well, but that's how you win the game. So the other thing was, and I do want to chat about this real quick, was that as you're exploring this universe, you're getting these different minerals. You get little asteroid belts. In the beginning of each round, you collect an ore for each asteroid belt and systems that you control. There are 3 basic minerals, and then there's Morphite. Morphite is obviously a very valuable mineral. In the video game, it is the most valuable and most rare mineral in the game, at least that I know of. And as in, I don't know how rare it actually is in the game. It is definitely the most valuable and presumably the most rare. But I had 2 systems that gave it to me, and you find it just by randomly pulling a token out of a bag. You can actually be in a very low value system, but pull a Morphite token out of the bag. Oh, I found a Morphite belt, like right next door to my home base. Fantastic, And even as it was, I got to the center system, which should arguably be a very valuable system, and it is. There's this sort of idea of outer tiers are level 1, middle tiers level 2, inner tiers level 3. So they're going to have more valuable construction sites to build your buildings on. You're going to draw 2 asteroid belts and only keep 1 of them. And so, again, you have a higher chance of finding Morphite. But I got to the center system, I pulled 2 tags, and they were just basic things. And in fact, I intentionally took the least valuable one to sort of cheapen the value of that system to make it less interesting for someone to try and steal it from me. Not because I wanted the points, we weren't playing with the points, I just wanted to be able to control it because I actually had a mission that said build a large ship in the central system. And so I took control of the system as quickly as I could. I built a engineering depot there that then let me build the large ship. Of course, I had to research the ship first, get the resources for it. Like, it took a lot of work. But again, because I had spent a lot of time sort of leveling up and improving the systems I already had, it only took me maybe 2 rounds to get that mission done. And for me, it made the game really interesting. It made the game thinky. Okay, there's so many different things I want to do. I actually focused really hard on getting literally my income to improve, getting a lot of money pouring in, because that'll let me keep buying that extra action. I'm going to buy that 4th turn. I never did buy the 5th one. I think I could have at least once in there. And so again, it let me just kind of keep doing things. I was also focusing really early on generating extra research. There are these research cards that you get to sort of acquire throughout the game. Each one has a certain cost of research points, but you can improve your research generation. You can also get sort of things out that say, well, hey, if you get a research done, you gain an extra research. Or if you have an engineering depot, you can go ahead and start another project immediately at the beginning of each round. And so little things like that can really help you. And it's thinky. It's a really thinky game. There's a lot of different things to consider. Those techs are really, really important for the game. It's very much like Star Trek Ascendancy for folks who may have played that. And that I feel like those technologies really make or break the experience. They don't make or break the game. But if you don't really take advantage of them and see the paths that they kind of open for you, you're just not going to do that well. I had fun with this. Unfortunately, my opponents really didn't. And it was a very different experience for me from the last one because of the fact that at least one player was able to very quickly focus on expansion and just won the game that way because we weren't using these things correctly. And so again, I don't know. I feel like this Titan expansion and the fact that you have to finish this thing could really, really change the way that you play the game because you can't just find an easy way to win. You have to, like I said, be able to generate every resource in the game or be able to buy it, which requires, building up an economy that supports that. And I think that alone, I think that just this expansion, the Titan expansion, really actually opens up everything about this game, and I don't know that I would ever play without it. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do a review of this. I was actually trying to do a review of this on the Dice Tower when I got that information from Tom, but there might be something here in the channel at some point. I would love to dig into this. I do think it would be a very, very difficult review because I've got to focus on the game from the standpoint of a 4X game, but I also want to be able to focus it on as a comparison to EVE Online, the video game, and that might be really, really challenging. Anyways, this was EVE War for New Eden. It's another one of those games where I wish I could somehow play it solo. I wish that I could somehow spend more time without having to go through all the effort to drag 3 other people to the table. But I also agree, talking about games like Root, which is just not going to be as interesting at 2. I'm hoping that my wife would give me another play with it. Maybe I can even kind of coach her and sort of help her through it to, hey, maybe you should work on this. Like, why don't you try and get another mission card? But sometimes you may draw a mission card. She had a mission card that said roll 10 dice in combat. To do that, you need a massive fleet of ships. And she was several rounds away from ever making that happen. Whereas I got one that said, have all of your research projects currently finished. Basically, don't have any current research projects. Really, really easy. I did it on the next turn. So I played that, and both of them were like, oh, son of a... So anyways, yeah, I wish I could find more ways to just be able to kind of explore that sandbox without all the effort of getting us there. That's enough about that game. All right, this next one, I don't know if I've ever talked about it on the Ratchet, but I've had this game for a while. This is Ring Circus by Devere. I don't talk about a lot of Devere games. Rock Hard 77 is my favorite Devere game. I think the rest of them have been just about terrible, and I do not understand why they're so popular. However, this is really the first one that I ever enjoyed, and it is a game about sort of building and traveling around with your own circus. You have a player board in front of you. It has a column of spots on the left side for mission or sort of end game objective cards. And then you have 3 rows of spaces for cards that are the 3 acts, the 3 rings of your circus at your circus, that you're building. And so you're putting these cards into these rows with this idea that each card that you play is actually going to require you to discard other cards for their monetary value. You're always playing those cards in lowest to highest value. So if you're playing a card that fits in between other cards, you're able to shift them and put them in between. It's not one of those games where you're stuck with the placement of your cards. Also, a neat little twist is that any card that you play is discounted by the highest value of card already in that row. So if I have a 5 and I play a 7, I only have to pay $2, which again might be discarding a card of value 2 or 3. I don't get any change, or 2 value 1 cards. The lower value cards that have the money, they range from 1 to 5, are kind of like opening acts. You might have someone with a dog who does tricks. You might have a clown. You might have a magician. And then when you start getting above value 6 or above 5, then you're getting into the trapeze artist. Maybe you're getting into the elephant who does some stunts. You've got lions that you've tamed, whatever. And then what you're doing is you're going around this central board. This board has a number of paths on it. Now, it was just my wife and I who played this. And so we actually have, I believe, 2 of the regions are sort of blocked off, maybe even 3 of them, if I recall, that you're not playing in. And so it's a little bit of a smaller map for us. You are going to these different locations. You have 3 different sizes. You have small cities, medium cities, and large cities. When you perform in a small city, you don't have to have any requirements. You just perform there. You will draw from the deck of the lower valued performers, the 1 through 5s. Like I said, the magicians, the dog actor, whatever. And they're also worth money. So you can put them into your circus, or you can use them as currency to hire other acts. And you'll get a number of those cards depending on a couple of factors. When you go to a medium city, the medium cities are kind of dotted across the map, and each city has a certain type of act that they want to see, and they're all going to be in that 1 to 5 value range. So again, they may want to see a dog trick. They may want to see a magician or a clown or a cowboy, for example. And so if you have at least one of those icons in your map, in your tableau, then you're going to get a little bit of an edge. But generally, they also want to just see the quality of your overall performance, which is measured by those little pedestals. Again, the sort of like the central stand that, a performer may perform on. And a bunch of cards will give those to you. Some of the cards may give you a pedestal plus an extra pedestal for every act of a particular color that is to the right or left of that card. And so you got a little track on your board. You're keeping track of your pedestal level. And when you perform in that city, you're going to try and claim the highest pedestal that you can. And those are going to let you either get more money. They'll let you get points, just straight up points. Or you can start drafting from the higher value set of cards of the other performers. And you're going to need those when you go to the big cities, because the big cities are going to specifically tell you they want to see an act of a certain value. They want to see the number 13, which may be a trapeze act. I'm not sure. I know that the number 10 is the elephant performance. And so a city may say, we want to see an elephant. We want to see a 10, and it happens to be an orange card. All the elephants are in orange cards, for example. You've got orange, teal, and purple. But then it's also going to say, well, hey, we want to see that elephant, that 10. But before we see the elephant, we want to see a teal actor, a teal performance of a lower value. So it's before the elephant, because they go in incremental value, right? Lowest to highest. And then after that elephant, we'd love to see an orange performer of a higher value. So you may get a card out that's, okay, well, it's a teal, and maybe it's a motorcycle show. I'm just making it up. Okay, I'm going to grab that card. I'm going to put that, let's say it's a 7. I'm going to put a 7 in that circus, in that row of cards. Then I'm going to get my elephant. I put my elephant to the right. And then I found lions. I got a lion show. That's a 15. I'm going to put that lion show out there. Now I've got and it's orange. So I got a teal low value. I've got that 10 elephant, and I got a high value orange. Now you go to that city and you perform. You're going to get the highest value of points that you can, because you're giving them exactly the show that they've asked for. And if you're the first person to go there, you get some extra points. Second place gets slightly less extra points, and you put a little token out there. And no matter where you perform, you're going to generate any money, drawing cards from that money deck, based on the symbols in your tableau. And that's another neat part about the game, is that you start off with a couple things visible on these spaces of these cards. Some of them are money symbols. And anytime you do a performance, you're going to draw a money card for every money token showing in your tableau. but eventually you start to cover those spaces up. You also have these train tokens all over your board. And that is the speed that your circus can move. And the more of them that are visible, when you perform, you first have to move. And you can move a number of spaces along these paths equal to how many trains you have in your tableau. So as you start to expand your circus, as you start to get more performers in play, you start to cover up those icons, and it literally slows down your circus. It kind of gives you this idea that the bigger you are, the slower you move, which kind of makes sense. And so I really, really enjoy that aspect. I really enjoy this thinkiness because basically you're on your turn, you're either moving and performing, it's all one action, or you're playing a card into your circus. And every time that you make a movement and a performance, there is a little Barnum and Bailey token, and they move around that board. And when they get all the way back to where they started, the game ends, and they're going to skip over any small city that a player has already performed in. And so when they first start off, they're just moving every space. They just move, they move, they move, they move. But then again, as you start performing different places, all of a sudden they start skipping spaces and they start moving quicker. And then all of a sudden at the end of the game, they jump from Texas all the way to New York City because you've performed all the way along that path, and they just skip over everything. They don't skip over the medium cities. And all of a sudden the game's over and you're sitting there going, oh shit, I have like 2 more turns left. And if you perform, then I've only got 1 more turn left. And suddenly things get very frantic and exciting and chaotic. And all of that is why I've really enjoyed this. The biggest complaint that I've heard about this game is, well, it's not very thematic. And yeah, you're right. You're just playing cards. You sort of build this tableau that represents your circus. But how the heck are you going to do a trapeze act in board game form, right? How are you going to have a stunting monkey in a board game? Like, this isn't Mousetrap. There's no physical things to play with. So at some point, you got to have some concessions that it's just not going to work like a real circus show. I like the fact that you're building this tableau. You're trying to build out these various performances, but you're also trying to be mindful of the tokens that you're covering. So you know what? I really want this act, but I'm going to grab this one that has the train on it so that at least I get a little bit of speed back into my circus. The one thing that can be a little frustrating with this, and my wife ran into this, was that she was trying to get from where she was over in the sort of northeastern portion of the country. This all takes place in the U.S. And she was trying to get all the way over to like Ohio, but she couldn't move that far, and you can't just move on your turn. Some of the cards, the lower value cards, can be spent as an immediate action, like a little bonus. You can maybe spend it during a performance to get some extra money. You can maybe spend it to just get some extra points. And there is one that just says move 3 spaces. I think we both had one at one point, and we had to discard it to use it as money to get another act into our show. And so she was a little flustered that she couldn't just get over to where she wanted to go. She was going to basically have to move over and just do a small city performance of no real benefit at that point in the game. And even then, she still was going to be able to get over to Ohio before the game just ended. So that can be a little frustrating. You got to really kind of plan for that stuff, which is not that easy to do. But all of it makes it a game that, like I said, it's a little tense. It starts off very kind of casual, and I get to do this, I can get this played. All right, cool. Yeah, I'm really happy with it. Oh my God, the game's almost over already. And that's what I really, really like about this. It's just a neat, a nice build-up, a nice progression. The artwork's really nice. The gameplay, we hadn't played this in a while, so it was a little difficult. I had to reread the rule book, but very quickly it came back to me, and we were able to play it without really any issues whatsoever. 3 Ring Circus by Galzyr. All right, this next game you have heard about here, but it's been a long time since I talked about Path of Civilization. This is by Fabian. I'm forgetting his last name. Fabian Gridell. I've got his autograph right here on the box. I picked this up at Dice Tower East last year. And I should mention real quick, I talked about playing 3 Ring Circus. This past Friday, my wife actually took the day off, and we just kind of spent the day hanging out together, knowing it was kind of going to be my last chance to, spend a day at home during a weekday and just kind of take it easy. I've always had Friday afternoons off every week, and it's just been fantastic for the past 3 years. But anyways, so we kind of went back, and I dug through some older games and pulled out 3 Ring Circus, pulled out this one. This is a very abstract civilization game. And it's another one where I hadn't played it in a while. I couldn't remember how it played. The rule book is not incredible, but it's it's very straightforward. It's very just basic. Do these things. This is how you do this. Place these things out here. Because the game is so simple. It is one of the cleanest designed board games I think I've ever seen. But I can't call it it's not a resource management game. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of like a tech tree idea, not even a tech tree. There's technologies that you're gaining. It's best if I just kind of explain the process, because there's very, very defined things that you do. There's like 5 phases to every turn. Almost everything in the game is simultaneous. You start off the game with 5 technology cards. You play 4 of them, and you scrap one. So literally from the very beginning of the game, you have a card that you'll never use. You pick 4 of them, you put them on your board, you scrap the 5th one. Then in the next phase, you look at the left side of the left 2 cards, and they have little boxes on them, although the starting ones don't. And in any box that you have on the left side of those left 2 cards, you place cubes onto these 5 trays of the corresponding color. You've got yellow, which are scribes. You've got blue, which I don't know what they are. You've got red, which is like military units. You've got gray, which is maybe like construction materials or builders. I'm not sure. And then you've got purple, which I don't know what they're called, but they're used to get leaders. It doesn't matter. It's just colors. Yellow, blue, gray, purple, red. And the colors are going to be shown on that token. You put your cubes in the tray of those colors. Next phase. The next phase is you look to see if anyone has enough cubes in a blue tray to advance on the, it's not prophecy, it's advance on the prosperity. It's not a prosperity track. I can't remember what it's called, but it's kind of like literally the worth of your civilization. And if you have enough space, if you have enough of those cubes, you spend them and you advance up on that track, you get a little bonus. You then also are going to use any of your cubes in the gray tray to buy any wonders. So the Sphinx, Stonehenge, I can't remember what they all were, but if you have enough gray cubes, you can buy any monument cards, and more of them are kind of added throughout the game. And then with any of your cubes on the purple tray, you can start to acquire leaders. And we had Martin Luther King, Julius Caesar, Mahatma Gandhi, Einstein, all these different leaders that you can kind of get. And same thing, they kind of come out throughout the game. And so that's that. I think that's the 3rd phase. Then the 4th phase is you look at the right 2 of the cards you would place at the first phase, and they have little circles on their right side. Just like you had cubes on the left of these cards, you have circles on the right of these cards, and you simply advance up these little tracks for every one of those circles. You also do have the civilization track or population track across the top of your player board, and anything that you gain is limited to the number showing on the spot that you've most recently passed or landed on. And so that kind of limits you. The size of your population limits you to how many things you can get, which makes sense. And then the last phase is that you're going to take all of these 5 research tracks that you have. You're going to choose one card from this display of technology cards, these kind of thin plastic trays that come with the game. You're going to spend as many of the resources of one of those 5 types that you want. You buy that card. Buying the card gives you immediate bonuses, which might be more resources. It might be putting out more cubes on those trays. There is also a combat track. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but throughout the game, you're going to have these sort of wars to kind of resolve. Again, very abstract. There's no actually fighting against each other, but there is sort of a neutral character, sort of almost like a neutral threat in the world, and you want to try and make sure you're staying ahead of that. And so you can possibly bump yourself up that track by buying these cards. That card gives you 5 cards to then go into the next round. But before you start the next round, you're going to resolve the conflict, whatever it might be, of the current phase. You have 9 phases in the game, and there are these little stands that hold these cards across your table. The left 2 are just kind of quick reminders of like game setup and sort of round structure. Nothing happens in the first 2 rounds, but in the 3rd round, you get a challenge. And each of these yellow challenge cards are going to basically give you maybe something that generates a reward or something. It may say, hey, for the player who has the most of this type of card, you get something. Or if you have 3 of something in play, you get something. Or for each symbol you have, you get something. And for every scribe that you have, those are cubes of your player color in the yellow tray, You're then going to usually add up the number of scribes plus anything you've played of a particular color, and you're going to get that many points. And then you're usually going to get some sort of a benefit. It may say, well, however many points you just got, divide that number by 2 or 3 and get something else, which might be putting more cubes out, might be more resources, it might be anything else that you're kind of getting throughout the game. And the other thing I should say real quick, as I already kind of alluded to, is that in between these challenge rounds, you have challenge rounds 3, 5, 7, and 9. And then you have combat rounds on 4, 6, 8, and also 9. And those are, as you'll probably see in these pictures, again, it kind of gives you a general threat number. And then it basically just says, okay, on that combat track that I already mentioned, whoever is in first place gets a reward, second place gets this, third place gets this, and your position on that track is compared against each other player, but also that sort of neutral threat token. And so if you were below the 13 in that last round, you would potentially be second or third place. However, you can also spend your military units in that little red tray to bump yourself up that track temporarily, kind of give you a momentary boost, basically using your army to secure the victory. And then, of course, you sort of lose those tokens. Your base position on that track never goes down. And that's probably even way more explanation than I needed to go into. What was really, really interesting with it, not even interesting, it's just neat, was that, like I said, we very, very quickly remembered how to play it. It's almost kind of easier if you just start sort of going through the rounds and you go, oh yeah, that's right. I remember this because we just put the cards out and then we get the things on the left side. And then we're going to look at the cubes that we already have out in the trays and we're going to do stuff. Do I have enough to advance in this track? No. Next thing. Can any of us afford to buy any wonders? Nope. Okay, next thing. You have enough cubes to buy a leader. I don't. What do you want? Okay, there you go. Next phase. Gain your resources. Next phase. Buy a card. Are you done buying your card? Me too. Let's do the challenge thing. I get 2 points, you get 3 points, I get 2 of these, you get 4 of those. Next turn. It's so snappy that you just constantly feel like that round token is just constantly marching down the board. Maybe you stop for a second. There's a nice compendium book that kind of shows you what all the symbology means of each card. Very nice and neatly organized. It's just really, really clean. The biggest detraction, the biggest complaint people have had about this game is it uses AI art. And it just looks basic. In fact, the art on the cards is fine. It's the very basic trays. It's the very basic combat track. It's the very, very just sort of flat backdrops to each of those challenge and military cards. Those are the components that look boring. Everything else looks fine. The art for the various people, the various wonders on these cards looks fine. It's perfectly believable. Nothing looks really funky or weird. There's no text. Of course, AI sucks at doing text, or at least it did. And the only other thing that I would say about it, again, is it's just very abstract. It's highly, highly non-confrontational, with the only exception that if multiple players decide they want to buy the same wonder or they want to recruit the same leader, each of your player boards has a little scale on it. And it basically says, well, depending on which kind of card that you're trying to get, this is where your priority is. So maybe that's my third priority, and for someone else, it's their first priority, so they're going to win that tie. If you're both trying to get that thing, they win. But there's going to be something that you win. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you want to focus on. You want to focus on those challenge cards and such across the round counter. But you just kind of go into it knowing, okay, well, hey, here's the one that I can really try and work towards because my priority is to get those cards, which means I'm going to win any tie. Every time I've played this in the past, I never did well. And I had a really, really good game this time. And I think that's because I focused on that sort of progression board that you automatically climb if you have enough cubes in the blue tray. And I really focused on doing that because I've never done that very well. It's a large amount of endgame scoring. I think for me, it was a good fifth of my score just on that board. But then also every time you go up it, you get bonuses. And if you're the first person to go up, you sort of pick which bonus you and every player coming up behind you is going to get. And so using those bonuses effectively actually helped me get a bunch of really high-level technologies around earlier than I was going to, and really actually set me up for some really nice endgame scoring. So I had a great game of this. I still really like it. And in fact, I forgot to mention this. I don't know if Ring Circus is going to stick around. I don't see that game lasting because it's a good game. I really like it. But again, it is kind of abstract in its nature, and it's just not super, super duper exciting through the whole gameplay. Okay, it's a circus, yeah, whatever. I actually kind of see myself holding on to this because of just how simple it is to get played. The setup maybe is a little long for what it is, but the gameplay is so quick and so snappy and just so clean. I wish overall it looked better, but I think it's a great game. It's a really, really good game. Last up, this one you have not heard about before on the channel. We actually played this morning. Is there a lot of loose stuff in here? No, I think I'm good. This is Lands of Galzyr. I've not had this too long. I got this one of the math trades. I don't remember which episode I talked about getting this. But it's a game that's kind of been on my radar because I thought it would be something that my wife and I would be able to play and sort of enjoy and get into. Sidebar, it is. Second sidebar, my daughter watched us play about one round and immediately wanted to be playing. This is a story-driven narrative game. And it's actually, so a couple things here real quick. First of all, this is one of those boxes, and in fact, I realized as I was talking about this to myself throughout kind of like the afternoon as I was kind of planning for this episode, I found myself drawing a ton of comparisons to Vantage. You've got skill checks, you're chucking dice, you've got the different skills in 6 different colors. It is eerily similar to Vantage. And in that same sense, there's a bunch of cards in here, not nearly as much as there is in Vantage, but that means that there is inherently going to be some spoilerific things going on. Now, we only played the first mission, or first sort of game. Like Vantage, every game is sort of isolated, although there is actually a save feature in this, so you can keep some of your quests, keep some of your items, your companions, the sort of things that you've amassed from a play. You can hold on to that stuff for your next play, which there's no like real leveling up. In fact, you're as good as you're ever going to be in the game from the very get-go. But you might sort of be customizing your character a little bit or getting various things that you find very, very helpful to maybe the way that you've sort of built that character. And I really, really like that. But again, it's going to be a little difficult to avoid some spoilers. This game has also been out for a little while. In fact, an expansion is already in the works. So I'm not super concerned about it. The board state that you're going to see, there's nothing custom or unique or special with the board state. We didn't change anything on the board state, but in my player tableau, which is the only tableau you're going to see, you may see some cards out there that kind of will show you a little bit of what's going on. Don't look at them in a lot of detail. That's really all that I think I need to say. It's not going to, you're not going to see a card and be like, oh crap, well now I know how this story ends. It's just not, you're not going to. There's not that much. And that actually leads me to the second topic, and that is that this is something of an app-assisted game. And I didn't actually know that. But you're going to need a tablet, computer, something, laptop, whatever. It doesn't actually use an app. It uses a website. When you go to that website, it kind of downloads and caches a lot of its information. So everything happens really, really quick. But when you go to a location, and each of the assorted cities and towns have certain spots on it that you can go to, I have no idea if those cards ever change. I have no idea. If new things open up or things get torn down, I have absolutely no idea. But when you're in a town, you can activate any of those sort of pre-printed locations on these cards. Also, you start off with a quest. As you're going along certain locations, you may find other quests. There is also a small quest deck that comes out at the setup of the game. And there are various cities, and of the various cities on the map, quests may sort of come out and say, well, if you go to this city, you can pick up this quest. Although most of them just send you to another place right away, which is a little frustrating. And so again, you got to play with an app. Or again, some sort of just web-assisted device. They say that you can actually download all the data so that even if their company goes belly up, you can still play it. I don't actually know how that works, or maybe I've already done that. I have no idea. But anyway, a lot of what happens in the game, a lot of the story is done through the web, through the the web portal. And so again, these cards are just kind of like things that I have. What it kind of all means and how it all works and what story I've had actually happens through the computer, and you're not going to see really any of that in this video. I waxed on there longer than I needed to. But anyways, Like I said, you start off the game with a quest, maybe a couple of random items, a couple little things are kind of pre-set up based on which characters that you're using, and then you're just sort of off to do whatever you want. On your turn, you may move a number of spaces around the map. There are these paths between the cities. There are also sort of checkpoints between each of these cities, and they're just marked by little icons on the map. And there's like hills, forest, plains, mountains, whatever. And then after you've made your movement, you have to do a thing. That thing can be your personal mission. That thing can simply, again, you can activate a location that's in a city, or if you're at one of those sort of random spots on the map somewhere, you do have an event card that you get to reveal, and then it basically says, do the topmost thing that you can do. So if you're in a city, you can do the city action. It literally says, if it's a Tuesday, do this. There is a day counter, sort of a calendar on the bottom of the board. And it's also a neat aspect of the game in that as you're getting things, whether they're people who are sort of accompanying you, whether they're items, some of them actually have a timer. And so it'll tell you, okay, when you get this card, it has a timer of a 4. You take these tokens, you're always going to get a matching pair of the token. You're going to put one token on that card, and the other token, the number of spaces in front of the current day equal to the number that was on that card. So if it said 4, you're going to go to the current day, go 4 spaces to the right, wrapping around for the week, and you put the other matching token there. When the day token lands, or when the day marker lands on a stack or a single token, you then go to each of the cards with that matching token in that stack and resolve whatever it says. In most cases, the card goes away. So, for example, I got injured, and it was a 3-day injury, and in 3 days that would just naturally go away. Or on that card, it said that if I go to a city, I can spend $2 to hasten that marker, which meant moving it a space to the left. And if it lands on the day token with that movement, it's immediately resolved, in which case, and for that card, I just discarded it. My wife got exhausted. She did something that really wore her out, and same thing. She had to go a couple of days being exhausted, but if she went a turn and didn't move, just basically stayed in whatever location she was in, it would automatically go away because she rested. And that was really, really neat. So when you go to do your thing, you then consult the app. Whichever quest you want to activate, whichever location you want to trigger, they all have a 4-digit code. You punch the code into the app. You give that device to someone else at the table, and they become the story master for that sort of action. And they read down through it. And what I thought was really cool about this right away is it's not just read it, resolve the outcome, chucking some dice, and you're done. A lot of these things say, well, is card 52 in play? Do you have 52? No, I don't have 52. Okay, no. I don't know why it's asking, but that means something, right? It may say, are you this character? Yes or no. I had one that said, is it winter? Actually, yes, we were playing on the winter side. Then this thing happens. And just all this. And then it'll also ask you, well, do you have certain tags in play? So there was one, whenever you go to a market, it asks you if you have a mount, like a horse or a donkey. And if you do or don't, it changes your answers based on what you're telling it you have. It basically changes the script based on what you have. And I thought that was really cool. Now, when it gets to certain things, so, okay, you get through all that, couple of questions you answer, and usually you'll get like a couple of options, and sometimes they involve a dice check. So real quick, the way that it works is you roll 5 dice. Usually amidst these scenes or these sort of quests that you're doing, you roll 5 dice. You're going to see this. We've got our player boards in front of us, and it has these little colored pieces of plastic on them. You only ever have 4 of them. So kind of like I was saying, you're always as good as you're going to be. You're going to always have 4 little upgrades on that board. You can possibly get to reorganize them. You sort of remove one from here to put one somewhere else, but you're always going to have 4. For every piece of plastic on that board, you can replace one of those black dice with a die of the matching color of that little piece of plastic. So real quick, there's 6 skill sets. I do not remember what they're all called. There is like a thievery one, which is kind of like the pink. There's a force one, which is the yellow, shows a sword. There's an orange one. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Orange was the force. Yellow was adventure. It shows a little camping tent icon. And I don't know what the other ones are. The black dice have 1 side dedicated to each of those 6 attributes. But then again, the colored pieces of plastic give you a specific die matching the color, and that die has 2 sides, so a 33% chance of getting double of whatever its corresponding symbol is. But on top of that, so if I'm going for, say, force, the sword, the orange, the pink to its left and the yellow to its right, those dice also have 2 sides. So again, a 33% chance of matching the symbol on either side of it. So if I was trying to go for a force quest, which I had a number of those actually in my play, I had 1 orange piece of plastic, 1 pink, and 2 yellow. So I would go for the orange. I would get 1 orange die. I would take the pink die, and I would take the 2 yellow dice. The orange die would give me a 33% chance of getting 2 sword symbols, and the other 3 dice gave me each a 33% chance of getting 1 sword symbol. The black die, I only have 1 black die left at that point, gave me a 12.5% chance, 11.5, I think, 33 divided by 2, whatever that is, percent chance of getting more swords. And it was funny. I had a couple of times where the black dice actually rolled what I needed and the other ones didn't. That was frustrating. But generally, that's what you're doing. And each of the quests, each of these sort of dice checks are going to give you easy, medium, or hard, or a unknown number of successes that you need. It's going to tell you, okay, you're trying to roll for the vision or the perception, which is the blue, or again, the force, which is the orange. It's going to tell you, well, this is an easy, medium, or hard. If it's easy, you need 1 success. Medium, you need 2 successes. Hard is 3. And then unknown literally means the game's not going to tell you how many successes you need. It's actually kind of a surprise. We didn't encounter any of those in this playthrough. But so, again, I'm reading through all this, and I said, okay, do you want to do this, which is a hard dice check on exploration, or do you want to do this, which is a medium check on force or thievery or whatever? And so it was actually kind of nicer than Vantage because you knew exactly what you were trying to do, unlike Vantage, which just says observe. Well, observe what? I have no idea. And we gotta roll the dice to even find out what it is you're trying to do. So this was a lot more straightforward. The downside to it was a few things. The downtime is severe. Now, luckily in a 2-player game, I'm narrating to my wife or she's narrating to me. So I'm either paying attention to my options or I'm presenting those options. I could see this at a 3 or 4-player game. Look, the turns were long. We played this for about 2 hours. Now, once our daughter joined us, my wife was kind of letting her kind of weigh in on the choices. Do you want to roll the dice? She wanted to read a couple passages, and she's a little bit of a slower reader. She's 12. It's fine. So I could see it at 3 or 4 being a long, long game. And in fact, my daughter already said she cannot wait to play this with us. And frankly, I would love to have her. I mean, I think that at 3 it would be fine. Okay, you're reading to her. I'm going to go, use the restroom or make some coffee or just, do something, whatever. I can kind of multitask, not a big deal. The other downside to it, though, and this is where I don't want to really spoil stuff, but you get a personal quest, and basically they're not that involved. We kind of resolve them fairly quickly. I don't know if you're supposed to. We kind of felt like that's what we were supposed to do, and so we focused on it, and we're like, wait, that's it? We're done already? And so the ending of it is really kind of anticlimactic. You can also play this thing competitively or cooperatively, but we didn't feel any of that. And in fact, even at the end of the game, and again, I won't spoil this, it's not anything really fancy, though. It's okay. You come together and you kind of get like one little choice, and then you sort of add up your score, which is just your sort of reputation, which is tracked at the top of the main board. And our total was 12, and that was kind of like the middle option. So it's like, oh, you're well known. Okay. The end. Huh? Like, what does that mean? And also we kind of realize that, well, since we've already knocked out our personal quest, when you go into the next game, if you keep your character and you keep all your stuff, you have no personal quest. So it's really like literally, what do you want to do? Now, I ended the game with like a companion, and they had little side quests. You also can, as I mentioned, you can go to these locations, you can pick up extra quests to work on, and they sort of stick around. So I could just, when I start off my next game, I could just go head off and kind of work on that thing. And again, that's great. It's a choose your own adventure. I will say that it seems like you get more of that prestige. I think I said reputation, but it's prestige. You get more of that if you roll higher, which is kind of out of your control. And so, like, I ended the game on my last little bit of my personal quest. I had some really great rolls, and I ended with all these really powerful attributes. And sort of, I'm going to go into the next game as a bit of a shit kicker, if I'm honest with you, and I'm going to be able to get a lot of things done, at least initially, which I'm excited for. My wife didn't really have that, so she's got a couple of things she carried in the next game, but it may not be quite as exciting of a start for her. And again, the ending of it overall just kind of felt anticlimactic. I don't really know that you win this, and in fact, I have no idea what the difference is between competitive and cooperative play. I'm kind of curious, because it really just seems like whoever has a higher prestige is going to win. But I don't know what you're going to win. Again, I don't really feel like it's going to be that drastic of a thing. And it's not one of those games where, again, like our next game really doesn't have any bearing on the games after that. You're not significantly changing the game state. I guess you can. For one thing, I know that when we hit certain months, you actually flip the whole board over and you flip the cards over for the various city locations. And we're going to go from winter into, spring and summer, which is really cool, mind you. But I don't know if the cities are going to start changing. And again, it's not like an overall progression thing. It's not like, okay, well, I got this done. I got to get this, there's no overarching story. We did our personal quests. They're done. I mean, we haven't launched any of these city quests. Maybe they're much more involved. I really don't know. But I will say that after the first play, we're kind of left going like, okay. I mean, it was cool. I liked how it all played out. I had my little Chromebook. It was very, very easy to kind of pass around and do the objectives and read the things off. Like I said, 2, maybe 3 players is probably as far as I want to go. And I'm very curious to see if it gets even more exciting, more interesting as we play. Had a lot of fun with it. Daughter can't wait to join us, which is a huge win. Any of you folks who might be parents know that if your kids see you playing something and they want to play, that is a win. And that is the end of episode number 83. Now, I want to circle back real quick for question of the next week. Whenever that may be, folks, just listen, be patient with me. I'll get to it as soon as I can get to it. Anyways, I want to circle back to the Eve game very briefly, because when we were getting done playing it, let me pop the box here into view for the conversation. Oh, sorry. I was talking to Daniel afterwards. Daniel really just did not have a good time with it. I was kind of trying to understand why. And he said, well, I really wanted to go fighty. I wanted to go confrontational, but you guys weren't, and I didn't want to be the butthole who started attacking everybody and made the game miserable for everyone else. And I said, well, I mean, excuse me. I was kind of planning on him going confrontational. That's why I put out the big Titan ship to kind of like deter him. But had he started attacking, I wasn't going to immediately hate the game. I mean, that's just a part of it, and I would have had to maybe change my tactics a little bit. And that's why I put my big ass ship out there. But, it'd be okay. And he was like, I don't know. He's like, I didn't want to get like super fighty, and I felt like the game needed to be more fighty, and it wasn't, and I was kind of irritated. And it got us talking, and I made a comment, and he kind of said he disagreed. And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting, because he wanted to be able to kind of go in there guns blazing and not make anyone upset about it. And I was like, well, to some extent, I'm not saying I'd be upset about it. But if you're in a game and it's a high aggression game and one or more players are just really ganging up on you, how does that make you feel? And that is the question of this week. How do you feel when it comes to aggression in games? And there's kind of a second question to this. Can you leave those emotions on the table when the game is over? And I don't want to go into the subject really now, but again, it's that kind of idea of, okay, well, I just spent X number of hours at this table, maybe getting ganged up on by a bunch of players. Are we going to go get dinner now? Or do I kind of hate all of you? Can you sort of separate what happens on the table to what happens off the table, outside the game space? Because I think it might be trickier. I think there's more to it. I think anyone who just says, oh, well, I can just beat up on all my friends and then walk away like it's no big deal. Can you? And more importantly, can they? That's the question of the week for it next week. That is the end of episode number 83. Thank you, as always, for your views, for your comments, for your participation. And I will also say real quick thanks to folks who congratulated me on the new job. I'm excited, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, and I'm hoping I can see y'all again soon. Cheers.